Hi, I'm Valerie Englehart, and in this video I am going to be doing a monochromatic painting of a crow using Daniel Smith Lunar Black. I have wetted my paper, which is 11 by 14 Arteza Pro watercolor paper, or Expert. Anyway, it's a more affordable paper than some of the other ones I use, but I really like the quality and how it handles. So I pulled that out and put it on my plastic board, which allows me to pick up the artwork and keep it at an angle. So I'm just sort of painting in the background right now, getting an idea of creating a moody atmosphere before putting in my subject. Look at that texture I've got going in the middle. I will say that you need to have a lot of patience with this sort of technique. When you put your board up at the angle, you might have to hold it for an entire minute before you start to see results. So resist the temptation to continue adding more water, because more than likely you'll just end up washing everything away. This paper is a cold press paper, so it does have a little bit of texture to it. So the granulating textures I get are a little bit softer than if I used a smoother hot press paper, but I still get lovely effects, so it doesn't really bother me. Just use whatever you have on hand. I've tried this technique on a few different papers, and so far, even though cotton hot press paper performs the best, as long as you understand the properties of your paper, so far I haven't found one that doesn't work, though I've only tried maybe 4 or 5 types. So I put in some strokes for where the nest is going to be, and then use the spray bottle, holding at a diagonal angle to get those drips. Splattering, I'm using a oil brush. It's just some cheap one I bought at Michael's a long time ago, and I'm using the oil brush instead of a watercolor brush because I am going in with very heavy pigment, and oil brushes are made for holding heavy pigment. I want my water control to come from my spray bottle. Now I've picked up some granulating medium, and I'm splashing it in just to see if I get some really cool texture. That's really all there is to it. And now I'm doing a lift technique for where the eggs need to be. So I've just pulled out, I think this is like a size 6 synthetic watercolor brush, just another really old one I got many years ago when I started watercolor. And I'm lifting out some egg shapes in the middle of this nest. Important to do while the painting is still wet, because it makes it nice and soft. And the majority of this painting is done in one wash. So now moving on to the crow, because that is my subject and the paper is wet, and I don't paint a lot of crows, oddly enough, because I love crows. Maybe that's why I don't paint them very much, because I love them so much. But off to the side, I do have a reference image that I created by copying and pasting images together that I found on sites like Pexels or Unsplash. So these are all copyright-free, free to use for artist photos. And so I just found the angle of a crow that I liked, and I found a picture of a nest that I liked, used Procreate to copy and paste things together, used some Procreate brushes to simulate what I was going for. That way I could work out things like composition and values before ever touching paint to paper. So I blocked in the shape of my crow, used the spray bottle holding it at an angle because I am paying attention to how my water is flowing, how my paint is flowing. That is part of the composition, is getting that texture to move directionally in the way I want. And then I love the texture that I can also get with that oil fan brush. Because it's an oil brush, it is bristly and rough, and so the marks that I put in have a more organic look to them. Yeah, a lot of this painting is painted where I'm just holding things up at an angle and just seeing what happens. A lot of this sort of technique requires relinquishing control, which is, I think, a big part of watercolor anyway. letting the medium do what it does best. I find that my favorite paintings are when I let it practically paint itself. I am just there to respond to it. But while I just hold things at angles and let them drip, if you want to work out a composition, obviously can't go wrong with pencil and paper. But I do love to utilize Procreate on the side because as I paint, sometimes after painting's dry, you think it's done, but there's just something missing and you've got something good, but you don't want to mess it up. Well, I can take the picture of my painting in progress, go into Procreate, and try some things out. And then once I find something I like, I can take what I learned and move that onto my painting. Mostly when I start adding the gold metal leaf, I can play with it in Procreate first to also keep me from overworking, because in Procreate it's digital, I can undo things. So I can push things really far and then be like, oh, it looks gaudy, or oh, putting a line there actually disrupts the flow. And then work all of that out on the side, and then that way I can go into my painting with confidence. I will say one of my weakest parts as an artist is doing bird feathers. So that is one of my greatest challenges. Though I really do love how the feathers on that side on the left, I didn't do any of that on purpose. That just happened. And when you have something in your painting that just happens and it's beautiful, leave it alone. It's wonderful. It's great. I will not touch it. And so now I'm lifting the top of the beak because my painting is still wet. By wetting the front and the back and having it on like a plastic board, it stays wet for much longer. Things stay workable. And so in watercolor, as long as the painting is wet, it is in play. It is workable. So this is the easiest time for me to manipulate things, to lift things. Though obviously there are some techniques that I would require the painting to be completely dry for. And part of the danger of keeping things working while wet is the tendency to overwork. And so that had to be something I coached myself on almost every few minutes painting this. Is I want to maintain the freshness. I don't want to overwork it. And because crows are black, I mean, we could have painted this in any other color, but I wanted that moody granulation that the Lunar Black gives. And so values are incredibly important for creating depth and dimension. And so even though we have a black bird, I still had to be careful to leave areas light enough so that if I went in very dark, I would get that depth. Because once you make everything dark, well, then what do? If everything's a dark value, then you don't really have a painting anymore. I mean, you do, but it's not as interesting. So now I'm doing little negative shapes in between where I see those organic flows of water and paint, and that's just to accentuate things, to really bring them forward. When you put something dark next to a light value, that light value pops. And because this crow is wearing a nest on its head, that means these would be like branches. And so I'm putting in the dark values to give the branches shape. I like to paint loosely, so I do want things to be left to the imagination, but I do want to give it enough structure that there's something to look at. I need to give the viewer enough information that they can piece the rest together themselves. There is such a thing as being too loose, but I do not have the patience for realism. Now I'm moving on to the crow, doing the same technique as I did with the branches, because I want to illustrate that the feathers closer to the head are smaller than the ones on the wings. And I do that by putting my little black dots closer together and making them smaller. I thought some of those black areas in the nest were a little too large, so I am just using my synthetic round brush to lift some of that paint off. And this video has been sped up about 250%, so I moved a lot slower than what you're seeing on screen. Videos are often sped up because you want the viewer to be interested, and also you don't really need to see me holding something for 2 minutes, letting the water drip slowly. But it can create this illusion that I painted this in just 20 minutes, when that is not true at all. And I don't want anyone to think that they need to rush, that, oh, well, Val created this painting in X amount of time, therefore that's all the time it should take, and that's not true. This painting, in a sense, with the starting and stop, took me all day. Now, even though I liked the directional flow I had, I found it to be a little too directional. So I wanted to break up that line. So I turned my paper so that water would flow at the other angle, and I made it soft. And then I just took a step back and I let the painting dry. So now I'm working on the eye. I had lifted an area of light where I could go and put the dark color back in to make the eye of my crow. And a lot of this is lift and then reintroduce paint. Lift, reintroduce paint. Do a little swoop on the eye to make it shine. Try and get a different texture going. I first painted in the eye and I thought it was too small, so thankfully all I had to do was wipe it away, try again. Watercolor has I don't know, people think that watercolor is unforgiving, that you can't correct mistakes. And I guess it's true in that you can't do it in the same way you would correct an acrylic or oil painting, but you can make corrections. You just have to know how your paints behave, how your brushes and paper work, and be willing for things to not go the way that you have them in your head. And all I'm doing right now is lifting little dots that are around the crow's eyes. Barely perceptible on camera, but sometimes the little details do make a big difference to show that you know what a crow looks like. I did mention earlier that this painting really did take me all day with my starting and my stopping. And when you work on a painting, you're usually very close to it. I would recommend, once you hit a good stopping point, prop it up somewhere. Look at it from 6 feet away. Then try looking at it from across the room. Interact with it as somebody who would be viewing the art would. And a lot of people won't be spending a lot of time up close and staring at it like we are. And shapes take on a different form when you look at them from a distance. You see the big picture instead of all of those little itty bitty dots together. And so that's another bit of advice to also keep you from overworking, or to see if the painting needs more. And I found that as I worked, where I thought the painting was done, because I'd achieved what I wanted based on my mock-up in Procreate, and what I thought I wanted, but as I stared at it while it was across the room, I was like, I feel like there could be more. I feel like the story is not complete. So don't be in a rush to create your painting all at once. Heck, put it away for a day if you need to. But I was just so jazzed about this one. Like, I was so excited about it. And doing those little geometric shapes to negatively bring things out is one of my favorite techniques. So on one hand, I was very excited and happy to keep going, but on the other hand, I had to be careful not to overdo it. So after letting it sit a bit, I decided that I needed to put a dark value behind, and as I was using my oil fan brush, I found, oh, this is great for creating like abstract leaf shapes. So not only is my crow wearing a nest crown, but this crow is in a tree. This crow probably very likely just obtained this nest. So I've already talked about how much I like crows, and I do love surrealism. I need to paint more of it. But why am I painting this? And why am I painting it in the middle of July. Well, that is because galleries, and also I do like art licensing, so businesses are always looking forward. So right now, in certain markets, they're already finishing up Christmas. I went to the grocery store the other day and they already had the Halloween candy out. So there's a gallery in one of the Seattle neighborhoods that has an art call for crow art. And I was so busy last year I didn't submit anything, so I really want to submit things this year. I'd like to submit 3 paintings, but even just one painting that I enjoyed, that I'm proud of, would be worth it. And so that's why I'm doing a crow. But I didn't want to just do a crow. The last time I got art in this gallery, I did a gouache and watercolor. The crow was at one of those old soda parlors and had one of those really fancy milkshakes. And it was colorful and covered in candy. It was called Candy Crow. And so this one is like the opposite. The other one was like dopamine infused color. This one is moody, textured, subdued. Squeezing out more paint. I use jam caps when I want to do these sort of paintings that use a lot of paint, and I'm only using one color. I will use clean caps from like jam jars because I can clean them out if I need to. They're really portable. They're the perfect size. So there, a little bit of reduce, reuse, recycle. Now, even though the paper is wet at this point, it's more damp than wet, but because I do have it up at an angle, about maybe 30 degrees, whenever I place the paint down, it does look like it's stationary, but the longer it sits, the more it just slowly starts to soften. So pay attention to the wetness of your paper when you do this type of technique. Though it's amazing going back and being able to see things as they happen. Like I'm seeing subtle shifts that I didn't pick up while I was painting it, but now looking at it, I'm like, oh wow, that's actually really cool. And this was intuitive. I recommend shutting your brain off. Put on a podcast, some music. I think I was listening to horror movie analyses. I had YouTube on in my ears with something that set the mood, so I could just zone out and not get too in my own head with this. All right, I want to strengthen the beak, so I grabbed that itty bitty little brush and putting in a hard line. And there were parts of this painting I actually didn't record because when I moved my crow off of my desk to let it dry or to just sit for a bit, I would notice something. And then I would like grab the things from my desk and go work on it in the corner. Lifting a little more of the beak to bring it into focus. And then to finish things off, I know that I wanted the eggs themselves to have some gold on them. But after playing with things in Procreate, I decided I also wanted to put gold around the nest itself as well. This was because I wanted to call attention, plus this painting is called Fashionista, so I wanted to give this crow a bit of glam. So the gold mostly ended up on the nest and the eggs, but I did put a little bit on the underside of the eye because she's fabulous. And here's the finished painting. So if you liked this video, press that like button so I know to make more like this. And if you want to see more, subscribe because I make videos every Thursday. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!